Scandinavia, autumn of 1872. While the villagers covered windows with rags and caulked thin wooden walls with damp mud, Einar Halvorsen did the opposite. On the edge of the fjord, alone, he dug. He dug deep, as if searching for warmth within the earth. The men laughed, not maliciously but with the certainty of those who have seen many winters. "It won't end before the first snowfall," they said. "It will freeze in the mud." But Einar didn't explain. He didn't ask for help. It wouldn't stop. He built it with peat. He sealed it with straw. He covered it with topsoil. While the others sped up to finish, he slowed down, as if he had time. 2 children stopped to watch. Does he live there? Not yet. But the snow arrived early that year, sooner than anyone could remember. And the question changed. Will he succeed? No one answered. Only smoke rose. And she wouldn't stop. In the village of Rovik, time was an invisible counter. As the first August winds descended from the mountains, families began to patch cracks, reinforce roofs, and gather the last fishing nets. Each gesture carried a silent urgency. Winter never knocked on the door. It broke it down. Men chopped wood in groups, marking their territory with rhythmic axe blows. The women prepared fish with coarse salt, then hung them on high stakes where the sun still shone for a few hours. The children ran among the hay baskets, but they knew that freedom had an expiration date. Everyone acted as if the cold was already lurking. Einar acted as if the cold was already inside him. He had arrived quietly, months before. No one knew exactly where he came from, or with whom, or why. He only showed up with 2 leather bags and a shovel. He chose a plot of land below the slope, near the frozen river, where the dampness made the soil unsuitable, according to the elders. "It's going to sink. Not even a tree grows there. You'll regret it." But he didn't argue. He just dug. Unlike the others, he didn't ask for temporary shelter. He didn't frequent the communal house. You didn't go to the autumn fair. In the fisherman's lounge, his name became a passing joke. Halvorsen, the peat man. He's going to make mud soup for Christmas. Nobody hated him, but nobody included him. Gradually, he ceased to be remembered, until the ground started to shift. In September, while everyone else was reinforcing their roofs with wood and rusty nails, Einar was raising thick walls of peat, layer upon layer, with dark clay and trampled straw. A strange, flat structure with low windows and a curved roof, as if it were made to hide, not to be seen. Some people laughed, others observed. The oldest woman in the village, Eldred, murmured, "He builds like the ancients." But nobody listened. Inside, life went on. Sven reinforced his house with new boards. Liv stocked dried fish and grains. Kari slept among blankets that still smelled of summer. On the other side, Einar was testing the fire. It would light up. It would go out. It would light up again. He lay down on the hard-packed earth floor, as if listening to the breath of the future. On a cold morning, Tor passed by. He stopped. He observed Einar's structure for a few seconds. "Are you really going to live there?" Einar just stared. He did not confirm. He didn't deny it. The next day, the first snowflake fell. The snow came before the harvest was over. In Rovik, this was not only unusual, it was dangerous. Families rushed to store roots, cut the last logs, and pack wool. Anything not done by the end of the first week of October would be left behind. Einar, however, remained the same. Alone. Slowly. No apparent hurry. While the men of the village piled firewood beside the wooden houses, protected only by thin layers of rags and caulking, he dug deeper into the ground himself. He dug a small indentation in the center of the hut, positioned the fire there, and sealed the walls with a thick mixture that blackened his hands. It seemed wrong. It looked primitive. From the top of the mountain, Sven watched, arms crossed. "His roof doesn't even close properly. It doesn't even have a chimney," Tori replied. "The smoke will kill him before the cold." They laughed. What they didn't know was that Einar didn't want the smoke to escape quickly, not in that type of house. He tested the cracks, feeling the direction of the air with the palms of his hands. He piled more earth. He covered it again. He lay on the cloaks and listened. At night, he moved hot stones from the fire to points on the wall. He measured with his body where the heat died down first. It was as if he were listening to the house breathe and fine-tuning that breathing. At the end of October, a storm swept through the mountains. Some houses lost their roof tiles. Others leaked out the windows. Einar's hut trembled, but it stood firm. He didn't show up at the final fair before the winter closure. He didn't buy salted meat, not even grains. He didn't even volunteer for the hunting rotation. That was enough to reinforce the social judgment. It won't last. Either he's gone mad or he wants to die. Perhaps the gods will punish him first. Liv, who until then hadn't said anything, blurted out one late afternoon, "He doesn't seem scared." Sven, cutting fish, grumbled, "Because you haven't seen a real winter yet." But Eldred, the one who only observed, thought otherwise. She remembered old stories, of buried houses, of fire that doesn't rise but stays, of walls that don't breathe wind but block it. One day, struggling through the rising snow, she stopped in front of Einar's cabin. She didn't knock. She just stood there looking. Smoke slowly seeped out through small cracks in the ceiling, spreading like a low mist. It wasn't thick, but it was constant, and she thought, this is no coincidence. In the third week of November, the sun stopped rising. The morning light became a sideways glow, piercing the sky like a whisper. For a few hours, day seemed to exist. Then, night returned, colder, denser, longer. Inside the wooden houses, the temperature dropped beyond what was bearable. Even with the fire burning, the tips of my fingers tingled. The walls were sweating from the inside. Then, ice began to sprout from the cracks. In Rovik, the rule was clear. You don't sleep with the fire out. But keeping the fire burning steadily required vigilance, and the vigil demands payment. Sven, who always went to bed early, began to doze off beside the fireplace, exhausted. One night he passed out. She woke up to leave shivering. The blanket was damp. The ceiling was dripping. Outside, Einar was coming out with a bucket in his hand. He walked slowly to the semi-frozen river, broke the ice crust with a stone, and collected water. He returned in silence. The smoke from the cabin wouldn't stop. Tor saw him pass by. He was coughing. His eyes were red from cold and tiredness. "Still looking for water?" Einar nodded. "You should ask for help." No response. The next day, Tor found frozen traces on the inside wall of his house. Mold was seeping from the corners. He tried reinforcing it with more clay, but the mixture wouldn't stick in the cold. He gave up. That same night, Einar moved the position of the fire a few centimeters. He used stones, not wood. He placed animal skins above his head, fastened with stakes. He created a smaller chamber. He slept on his side with his back against the wall where the heat accumulated. The cold was intensifying. The village felt it. The men spoke less. The children were coughing. The damp provisions were starting to spoil. Kari, the younger girl, was seen crying silently while warming her feet near the fire. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from fever. Sven sought Eldred. "The girl is burning up." She closed her eyes for a moment. Then he simply said, "She won't last a month like this." Outside, in the distance, the smoke continued to rise steadily, thinner, but never absent. Someone commented, "Maybe." He was right. Sven turned his face away. "What's settled? This is a grave with a roof." But that night, he didn't sleep, because his house was freezing cold, even the floor. As December approached, the snow swallowed the roads. The trail that connected Rovik to the frozen cove vanished under 3 meters of white. No landmarks, no visible stones, just an opaque void that erased direction, memory, and hope. It was in this context that Tor made a hasty decision. The food in his house started to get moldy. The firewood wouldn't dry out. Mold was growing up the ceiling beams, and the wife was coughing up blood. "I'm going to the riverbank to get help." Sven tried to stop it. "He'll die on the way." But Tori didn't listen. She put on layers of damp wool, tied furs to her feet, and went out at dawn. He was wearing a rope tied around his waist. He disappeared before noon. He didn't come back. For 2 days, only the wind answered. During that same period, Einar made a mistake. While reinforcing one of the interior walls with heated stones, he mistakenly used a green branch. The moisture from the wood created steam. The steam rose and froze on the ceiling. In the early morning hours, a corner of the structure partially collapsed, releasing freezing air. For a few minutes, the fire was almost extinguished. He woke up with the skin on his face hurting, cracked lips. He stood up in silence. He crawled to the hole. He blocked the wind with a block of damp earth. Then he pushed skins inside and lay against the wall to warm the clay with his own body. He stayed there, hours, sleepless, monitoring every tremor in the structure. The following morning, the smoke rose again. But something about her was different. Slower, thinner, Sven realized. He almost lost his temper. and he looked at his own fireplace, which barely warmed the ceiling. In the house next door, Carrie began to have spasms, high fever, cold arms, shortness of breath. Liv held the little girl in her lap, wrapped in blankets. She won't make it through the night. And then Eldred said firmly, "Take her there." Sven's eyes widened. "What?" "The mud house. It retains heat. Do you want me to ask for help?" Silence. Outside, Einar was collecting snow in a wooden basket. Slowly, without knowing, Sven left. He went down to the cabin. He stopped in front of the door. It didn't match. When Einar looked, he simply said, "The girl is burning. She's going to die." Break, without pleading. No pride. Einar opened the entrance. I said nothing. He pushed the skins away. He created space by the fire. The fire grew louder. Carrie arrived in her mother's arms. Too small. Too hot. Inside the mud house for the first time there were 3 people, and the fire wouldn't stop. Kari spent the first night motionless, breathing as if she had stones in her lungs. Einar didn't sleep. She alternated between adjusting the fire and tightening the hides around the thermal chamber. She positioned hot stones under the rustic wooden platform where the girl rested, raising the heat close to her body without letting it escape. On the second day, Liv fainted due to lack of sleep. Sven took turns with her. He coughed incessantly. His eyes were sunken, his beard damp with condensation. He was the one who rushed out to fetch water, breaking the ice with his fist. Einar was watching him. Then she started accompanying him, without saying anything. By the end of the 5th day, the small room in the house was fuller than planned. The smoke no longer rose in a straight line. It billowed heavily, trying to escape through gaps that Einar reopened with his hands. The east wall began to give way from the inside. The moisture had weakened the pressed clay base. Einar measured the damage with a touch. Then he went to the corner where he kept dry fibers. He mixed it with ash, saliva, and pieces of frozen peat. It created a thick mass. He applied it directly with his hands. He worked for hours. None of the 3 guests really understood what he was doing, but they felt it. The heat wouldn't die down. On the 8th day, a strange noise echoed outside the house. A long, high-pitched howl came from the north. It was the structure of one of the village houses, collapsing under the weight of the snow. Sven recognized the sound. It's Tore's house, and he lowered his head. In the late afternoon, 2 more men appeared. Wet clothes, purple hands, dry eyes. They stopped at the entrance. They didn't hit each other. They just looked. Einar saw them. He moved a basket away. The fire intensified. Now there were 5. The small mud house and the one they said would be a tomb became a refuge. The challenge wasn't just to keep the heat going. It was to maintain the structure, the order, the silence. The following night, the flames began to subside. The firewood was running out. Sven stood up. "I'll go get it." Einar shook his head. He put on the wet woolen cloak. It went out. It disappeared into the snow. He was gone for more than an hour. When he returned, his arms scratched, he carried on his shoulders 3 bundles of dry branches and a frozen log. He didn't say a word. He went right up to the fire. He carefully added the new fuel. He sat on the floor. He breathed. The next day, Liv found a bowl of hot water nearby. I didn't know who had put it there. No one took responsibility. But Einar was watching her from a distance. He was attentive to the warmth of her body, to the sweat on Kari's forehead. He began preparing small portions of broth, made with dried fish, aged fat, and roots preserved in salt. It wasn't much, but it was alive. Meanwhile, in the other houses, the silence was absolute. The chimneys have stopped working. The cracks froze from the inside. Some men stopped going out. In some houses, no one ever saw the light again. The village shrank, but smoke was still rising from the small cabin. In the 3rd week of January, the snow changed color. From opaque white, it turned to gray. The smoke from the houses disappeared completely. Even the sound of the wind seemed emptier. In Ruvik, no more axes, footsteps, or conversations could be heard. It was the sound of an exhausted village. Einar maintained the fire with clockwork precision. I had 2 dry branches left, a bag of pressed peat, and the last log of denser wood, which I only used on nights of 30 degrees Celsius. The roof still held the weight of the snow because he reinforced it from the inside with heated stones, stacked in a way that redistributed the heat across the base. That morning, there was a knock at the door. Not a demand from someone who demands it. A beat for those who wait. Einar opened it. There were 2 men there. One of them was Magnus, the same one who laughed loudly in the fall, saying that He didn't even have a chimney. Now he held his daughter in his arms. The girl was trembling. Her face was gray. Her lips were chapped from the cold. It's not hot at home anymore. Break. And my wife hasn't woken up since yesterday. Einar looked around the cramped interior of the cabin. There were already 5 people inside. Limited space. Food at its limit. But he knew. Warmth must be shared. The gap widened even more. They went in silence. No one commented, but their eyes met. Liv recognized Magnus. Sven, too. For a moment, the trial dissolved. Einar rearranged the blankets. He pulled the sleeping platform closer to the fire. He positioned Carrie next to the new baby girl, so they could share body heat under the same skin. He adjusted the smoke vents. He began rationing the broth. It was now a living system. Magnus tried to help. He grabbed a bucket to scoop up snow, but as he left, he fell to his knees. The cold broke him. Einar pulled him back. He placed his hands inside a warm woolen bag. I said nothing. In the early morning, one of the oldest residents of the village appeared, staggering, his face burned by the cold. He looked at the cabin as if he were seeing one last chance. He didn't even ask. He just waited. Einar nodded. The old man went inside. 11 people now, in a house made of earth. For days, everyone took turns. One person searched for snow. Another tended the fire. Another collected the steam that had accumulated on the hides to prevent mold. Einar never rested. He maintained everything, with the same patience as someone who built the house stone by stone, as if he knew that one day this would be necessary. In the last week of February, an aurora appeared in the sky. Weak, pale green. Sven saw her through the crack. It's the thaw. Nobody celebrated, but Liv held Kari's hand more firmly. Einar left the cabin in the morning. The sky was clearing. The first birds had returned. He stepped onto firm ground. He looked around. 3 houses had collapsed. 2 completely buried. The others, smokeless. But from yours, the smoke continued on. March arrived with a lighter breeze. The snow no longer lay flat. It merely covered the surface. Some paths began to open up. The doors that had once groaned with coldness now creaked with moisture. The village of Rovik emerged from a profound silence. But it came out differently. Of the 12 people who took shelter in the mud house, all survived. Kari regained movement in her hands. Magnus's daughter smiled again, whispering. Even Sven's eyes seemed calmer, lowered. When the thaw allowed, the survivors left the shelter. One by one, no rush. Without fanfare, nobody said thank you. It wasn't even necessary. Einar did not go out with them. He stayed inside, rearranging stones, stacking damp firewood to dry, as if he already knew the next winter was coming, as if the next one had already begun inside him. He wasn't seeking recognition. I wasn't expecting a reward. I just wanted to be ready. At the first communal meeting after the thaw, Eldred spoke little, but before getting up, he left a strip of wool on the center table. It was brown, spend, and it had an ancient symbol sewn by hand. A small house covered with earth. No one commented, but nobody removed the piece from there. Months later, 2 men from the village began building with clay. Another one started storing peat. Someone reinforced the roof with stones. No need to ask. Without saying it was because of Einar. But it was. The mud house was still standing, quieter than before. More alive, too. And Einar? It remained the same. Digging, sealing, preparing. Not to beat the winter, but so that winter would never again win against the others. Some houses are built to show strength, others to hide their fear. But there are houses that weren't built to be seen. They were made to last. The cold weather returns every year. But now in Rovik he finds a different kind of silence. No more surrender, but it requires preparation. Einar never told his story, because it didn't need to be told. It was felt, in the hands that today mold clay. In the eyes that observe before judging, in the smoke that rises, slow, steady, of a house that nobody believed would last. But it lasted, because it was built to make what matters last. If this story reminded you of someone who insists on remaining silent, from someone who builds without applause, or perhaps from yourself, consider subscribing to the channel. Here, every story is a refuge, and each subscription helps keep that fire burning. Until next time.